Let's start with the power switch. This is connected to the 4-pin XLR on the rear of the unit. The switch can be defeated by using an internal jumper if desired. Next, we have the sample rate button. By pressing this button, you can step through the available sample rates one at a time. Something important to note is that the sample rate and clock source buttons get locked out while the ULN-8 is transporting audio, so that you don't accidentally bump them during use. By pressing the clock source button, you'll step through the available sources in succession: internal, word clock 256, and AES. Here I'm at 44.1 on internal clock. When I press the clock source button, I move to word clock at 44.1, or the 1x rate. When I press the clock source again, it moves to 88.2, or the 2x rate, then 176.4, or the 4x rate. Each time I press the button, I cycle through the 1, 2, and 4x rates for that source. AES is a bit different, since we not only have 3 different clock rates, but also have 4 different cable pairs to choose from. We have AES 1-2 at 1x, 2x, and 4x, 3-4, 5-6, and 7-8 until we come back to internal at 1x. Now let's look at the control modes, the I/O trim modes, and how they work with the encoders. The ULN-8 offers several control modes directly from the front panel. By using the Control Mode button, you can select Monitor Control, Preset Select, Input Type, Channel Linking, Phantom Power Enable, and User Mode, which is for future expansion. When there is no selected control mode, the front panel is in the I/O trim mode. You switch between the inputs and outputs by toggling the I/O trim button. The I/O trim and control modes work together. For example, if I go into monitor mode, you can see that the LEDs around encoder 1 are lit, and I'm in input. By pressing on the encoders, I can select which source is routed to the monitor controller, 1 or 2. If I go to Output, I can select which output path I'm routing my source to. In preset mode, you can recall any of the 8 previously stored presets. Presets include input selection, signal routing, levels, and DSP patches. These must be stored using the MIO console, but can be recalled in standalone use. In the input control mode, by pressing the encoders, I can step through line input, mic input, or mic send return mode. Link mode allows you to link encoders for several inputs and outputs. For example, by selecting Input on the I/O trim, I can select Input 1 as a master and Input 2 as a slave. Once I exit the control mode, as I turn Input 1, Input 2's gain changes as well. What you're seeing is our dual digital Vernier display. The gain for each channel is described by the green and red LEDs around the encoder. Each step of the red dot indicates a 0.5 dB change in gain. Each green segment indicates 7.5 dB of gain. Since these channels are linked, as I change channel 1, channel 2 will track that change. If I change channel 2, channel 1 does not change. And if I change channel 1, channel 2 will now track with an offset. This makes it very easy to do multi-channel input and output gain changes. By going back to link, I can deselect channel 2, then channel 1, and now they're not linked. If you'd like to have a true stereo control, you link channel 1 to channel 2, then link channel 2 to channel 1. Now if I change 1, 2 tracks, and if I change to 1 tracks. Next is 48-volt mode. By pressing the encoder, you can toggle phantom power on and off for each channel. Phantom can be turned on regardless of which input you're using. This allows you to have a condenser mic powered up while using the line input, then switch to the mic without waiting for the element to reach operating voltage. With none of the control modes indicated, we can change the input and output trims. Let's see what happens when we play some music. The ULN-8 offers comprehensive front panel metering of your inputs and outputs. Each analog channel has a 15-segment multicolor meter, and there are signal present indicators for the digital I/O. There are also digital lock LEDs, as well as indicators to show which digital pair is the clock source if selected. Another feature is that as you change gain, the gain value is displayed in the meter section. Yellow numerals for negative gain, green for unity or positive. The encoder resolution is software selectable. The default is 1 detented click is 0.5 dB. Pushing in on the encoder and turning changes by 3 dB. These values can be changed to whatever you'd like in the Mio console software. Another feature is that when a channel goes into overload, the channel's entire meter and encoder LEDs will turn red to give you positive indication that you're clipping. There's another user-selectable meter mode. With the I/O trim in the input position, press on encoders 1 and 8 simultaneously. You can now see the channel's metering directly around its encoder. By holding the I/O trim button in and turning encoder 8, you can change the brightness of the front panel. On the right of the front panel, we have the syslock indicator to show that the box has a valid clock source, and the firewire indicator, which shows that the box is connected to a computer. Here we have the digital section with multicolor input and output present LEDs, lock indicators for the inputs, and the select button to choose an input pair to clock to, along with clock indicators. Next we have the monitor control section. There are mute and dim controls with multicolor LED indicators. By turning the encoder, we change the level of the monitor controller. By pressing the encoder, you can switch between the monitor controller and the CANs level. Next to the monitor control section is the headphone jack. And finally on the front panel there are 2 DI inputs that are paralleled with line inputs 1 and 2. They're ultra-high impedance and are jumper selectable for 0, 10, or 20 dB of gain. Let's look at the ULN-8 specific options in the Mio console. Here in the mixer we have the mic SR option, which allows us to patch devices between the ULN-8's mic pre's and converters. If you go to the console window and click on the pull-down menu for the ULN-8, you now have an option for front panel preferences. Here you can set input and output control linking, change the brightness and intensity of the front panel illumination, set the hold time for the numeric gain display on the meters, set the clip hold time, input and output clip thresholds between 0 and -6 dB, and set the encoder step values for when the encoder is turned normally and when it is turned while pressed. Finally, if we go to the recording preferences, we have an option to timestamp files. When this is turned on and the file format is set to BWF, we can select LTC as the source, the input device, which is the ULN-8, and we can set the source to be the SMPTE input. When there is valid timecode present, the recorded files will be timestamped for easy spotting in the DAW of your choice. I hope you've enjoyed this tour of the ULN-8 and its features. For more information, visit mhlabs.com.